The laughter echoed too long. At first, Amara thought she'd misheard. A nervous chuckle, maybe, the kind that slips out in boardrooms when tension spikes. But the sound multiplied, bouncing off glass walls sharpened by fluorescent light. "Come on," said Mark Talbot, the CFO, smirking over his tablet. "You actually think they'd trust someone like you to handle the acquisition?" The word they landed like a slap. The investors, all white men in their 40s and 50s, didn't correct him. One cleared his throat. Another looked down at his notes. The CEO, Greg Lawson, offered a thin smile, polite, corporate, poisonous. Amara kept her voice level. "My proposal just saved your company $6 million in projected losses." Greg leaned back, lazy confidence radiating. "Relax, Amara, no one's questioning your effort. But leadership requires optics." His eyes flicked once toward her skin, something inside her cracked, quiet, deliberate. The presentation file on the screen flickered, graphs dissolving into black. She closed her laptop with a click that sliced through the silence. "Optics," she repeated, every syllable chilled steel. "Got it." When she left the glass conference room, she heard the laughter resume, lower now, but freer unrestrained. 2 weeks later, every man in that room would receive an email stamped with a new company logo, owned by Amara Blake Holdings. But in this moment, her heels echoing through the hallway, pulse steady, vision narrowing to a single burning point. Amara knew only one thing: they would never see her coming. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off their voices. Only her reflection stared back, silent, furious, unbroken. The conference room gleamed, all glass, chrome, and white light. It was designed to intimidate, to remind everyone that transparency didn't mean equality. Amara adjusted her blazer, exhaled once, and tapped the projector. The title slide appeared. Acquisition Proposal, Blackstone Integration Plan. Numbers, charts, growth arcs. Months of work compressed into slides. Greg Lawson, the CEO, lounged at the end of the table. "All right, Amara," he said. "Let's see what you've got." Her voice was steady. "The proposal minimizes risk exposure by consolidating assets under a single umbrella. It saves $6 million in redundancies while—" Mark Talbot snorted softly. "Ambitious. But don't you think it's aggressive?" She looked at him. "Aggressive saves money." A few muted chuckles. Someone murmured, "That's one way to put it." Amara continued, scrolling through projections. Every metric was airtight. Still the air thickened with doubt. Greg leaned forward. "So your model assumes Blackstone will accept a minority-led negotiation?" Her throat tightened. "They responded positively to my outline." He tapped his pen. "People talk. Optics matter." The word sliced clean. She heard Leah's voice in her head. "They'll smile while they cut you down." Greg smiled now. "Let's be realistic, Amara. Relationships like these are delicate. Sometimes a familiar face gets better traction." Mark added, "You know how conservative their board is. Maybe if Greg leads the call." "I built that contact," she said quietly. No one answered. The silence was consent, her pulse hammered. "So you're saying the deal's solid, just not with me presenting it?" Greg gave a thin grin. "Don't take it personally." Laughter, restrained, polite, lethal, rippled through the room. She closed her laptop. The click was final. "I don't," she said. "But you should." The words dropped like a stone. Outside, the hallway's glass walls reflected her face from every angle. Strong, unreadable. Inside, their laughter resumed. By evening, she was gone. But before she left, she slipped a drive from her pocket into her bag. Company data encrypted, untouched. The elevator doors closed behind her with a hiss that sounded almost like applause. The rain came down in silver sheets, streaking the windows of Leah's downtown office. Amara sat across from her, untouched coffee cooling beside her hand. The city hummed beyond the glass, indifferent, alive, and utterly unaware of the war she'd just declared. Leah removed her glasses and sighed. "You did the right thing walking out." Amara didn't answer immediately. She watched a cab slide past below, yellow cutting through gray. "It didn't feel right," she said. "It felt like surrender." "It's not surrender to stop bleeding," Leah replied. "They wanted you humiliated, not just gone. They'll move on. You should too." Amara turned, eyes sharp. "I'm not built to move on. Not from this." Leah studied her. You have that look again, the one that means you're already planning something dangerous. Amara allowed herself a small, humorless smile. I took copies of Lawson Capital's quarterly ledgers and some private correspondence. Let's call it curiosity. Leah leaned forward. Amara, that's risky. You know what they'll do if they find out. Fire me again? This isn't funny. If there's internal data on that drive, it's not yours to use. Amara's voice dropped. They've been using me for years. My data, my analysis, my face on their diversity posters. That drive just levels the field. Silence stretched. Leah finally said, What are you hoping to find? The truth. I've seen numbers that don't add up. Side transfers, offshore patterns, missing vendor trails. Lawson's hiding something. Leah folded her arms. If you're right, it's criminal, and you'll be collateral damage. Then I'll take the hit on my terms. The conviction in her tone chilled the air. Leah leaned back resigned. You sound like your father. Amara's gaze softened. He didn't fight long enough. Leah's voice gentled. He fought the wrong way and alone. Amara didn't respond. Her fingers tapped the mug once, rhythm steady. Then I'll fight smarter. That night in her apartment, Amara sat amid open folders and flickering screens. The hum of her laptop filled the room. Files unfolded line by line, balance sheets, internal memos, scanned contracts. One email thread caught her eye. Subject line, Deferred transfers, board discretion. Attached, a spreadsheet of unnamed accounts and payment trails leading to an offshore entity, GLC Partners, Cayman. She scrolled, pulse quickening. The signatures at the bottom were unmistakable. Greg Lawson, Mark Talbot, her jaw clenched. Optics, she whispered. The word turned sour in her mouth. She printed the documents, careful, methodical. The paper fed out, crisp and final. Each sheet was a nail in a coffin not yet built. The phone rang. Leah again. You're still at it, aren't you? Amara hesitated, then said, You were right. It's criminal. Money laundering through a shell. Then call the SEC. They'll bury it. Greg's got friends everywhere, Leah sighed. So what's the plan? Amara looked at the wall of documents. I start over. Clean name, new firm, and when they're weakest, I'll buy them piece by piece. Leah exhaled. You think you can beat a system that big? Amara's reply was almost calm. I don't have to beat the system, just the men who hide behind it. The days blurred into data and strategy. Amara registered a consulting firm under her own name, Blake Advisory Group. A single-room office, a laptop, one assistant she couldn't afford. Investors smiled politely when she pitched. You're talented, one said, but we're looking for a more established image. Established, she repeated flatly. He nodded, not catching the edge in her voice. You know, like credibility. By the third rejection, she stopped expecting sincerity. That night, Leah called again. How's the empire? Quiet, Amara said. But foundations usually are. Leah hesitated. Promise me you'll stay within the law. Amara looked at the document spread across her table. I'm not breaking it. I'm rewriting it. There was a pause. Just remember, they don't play fair. Neither do I, she said, and hung up. Hours later, the last file decrypted. A set of hidden transactions appeared. Lawson Capital's fake subsidiary funneling millions through charitable initiatives. Her stomach twisted. Every smiling photo of Greg at ribbon cuttings flashed through her mind. The false benevolence, the press headlines about inclusive leadership. Amara printed the proof, stacked it neatly, and whispered to herself, let's see how transparent the glass looks when it shatters. Outside, dawn broke, pale light spilling across her desk. Illuminating every page, she didn't smile. She simply started the next folder. The morning light turned the city gold, but Amara's office, while in a cramped space above a law firm, remained in shadow. A fan hummed overhead. Coffee steamed beside a stack of legal pads covered in her small, precise handwriting. She stared at the board on her wall. Names, arrows, numbers, motives. At the center, Lawson Capital. Around it, lines connected Greg Lawson, Mark Talbot, 2 shell companies, and a non-profit that never filed taxes. The pieces were aligning. Slowly, quietly. Her phone buzzed. Leah. You look like you haven't slept in 3 days, Leah said when Amara answered. I haven't, Amara replied. Sleep is expensive when you're broke. You're not broke. You're just pre-rich, Leah said dryly. How's the consulting firm? Amara looked at her empty inbox. Thriving in silence, Leah hesitated. You sure this is worth it? Amara's tone sharpened. They built careers off my work. My models, my words, and now I have proof they've been laundering investor funds through fake outreach programs. I'm not saying you're wrong, Leah said. I'm saying you're outnumbered. Amara smiled faintly. They think numbers make them safe. I think numbers make them predictable. That night, Amara found herself replaying old memories, her first week at Lawson Capital, the way Greg had introduced her during a client dinner. This is Amara Blake, he'd said, smartest analyst we've ever had. And diversity looks good on us, right? Everyone had laughed. She'd forced a smile, heat rising in her cheeks. She'd told herself to endure, to rise high enough that their jokes couldn't touch her. But they never stopped. The compliments with Barb's, the meetings she wasn't invited to, the feedback about her tone. You're too assertive, Amara. Clients feel intimidated. Try softer colors next time. Every line etched another invisible wall. Weeks passed. Blake Advisory Group barely survived, but Amara's plan grew sharper. She needed partners, people inside Lawson Capital's ecosystem who wanted out. She started discreet outreach, calling former employees, vendors, consultants. Most refused. Fear lingered in their voices. Then one reply came through, a name she remembered from her Lawson days. David Shu, senior data analyst. They met at a cafe near the train station. David looked older than she remembered, eyes hollow, posture wary. You shouldn't have contacted me, he said quietly. Then why did you answer? Amara countered. He sighed. Because I saw what they did to you. I figured anyone they wanted gone probably had the truth. She leaned forward. You still have access to their archives? He hesitated, then nodded. Read only. They never revoked my credentials. Too busy pretending I never existed. Then you can help me. He shook his head. You don't get it. Lawson protects its people. They've got judges, auditors, politicians, all tied up in mutual favors. I don't need protection, Amara said. I need evidence, David studied her. You're serious, she met his gaze. Deadly. He sighed again, rubbing his temples. All right. But once I share this, I disappear. No one can know it came from me. Done, she said. He slid a flash drive across the table. Start with the folder marked Black Sun. You'll understand. Back in her office, Amara inserted the drive. Hundreds of documents unfolded. Spreadsheets, communications, encrypted logs. Then she opened Black Sun, her breath caught. It contained communications between Lawson Capital and a lobbying firm directing campaign donations, political laundering through business fronts. Greg Lawson's name appeared repeatedly, signed off under Community Development Initiative. Her stomach turned. The fraud was deeper than she imagined, not just greed but power, influence, control. The realization came like ice water. Lawson Capital wasn't just corrupt. It was a node in a network that rewarded whiteness, connection, and compliance. Amara sat back, staring at the ceiling. All those years, her silence, her professionalism, had kept her complicit in a system designed to keep her out. Later, Leah called again. You sound off.
What did you find?
Amara hesitated. It's not just financial. It's political, meaning Greg Lawson funds candidates who keep corporate probes off his back. Meaning he's untouchable, unless someone burns the whole web. Amara, I'm not saying I'll do it, she said quietly. I'm saying someone has to. Leah's voice was soft but firm. Then make sure when the fire starts, you're not standing in it. Amara didn't reply. Instead, she looked out the window at the city lights flickering through the smog. The reflection of her face in the glass looked almost unfamiliar. Harder, steadier, sharper. 2 days later, a rejection email arrived from a venture capitalist she'd met last week. The line that burned was the last one. We're impressed by your credentials, but your brand may not align with our investors' comfort zone. She stared at the words until they blurred. Comfort zone? The phrase pulsed like a bruise. She called Leah. You ever notice how racism got a PR team? They call it optics, culture fit, comfort zones. Leah sighed. You're not wrong, but you can't fight branding with anger. I'm not fighting with anger, Amara said coldly. I'm fighting with math. By midnight, she was at her desk again, cross-referencing Lawson Capital's offshore accounts with public SEC filings. The patterns lined up perfectly. Every transfer hid beneath a different consulting fee. She leaned back, eyes burning. The board members' signatures stared back at her like ghosts. They had laughed in her face. Now she had their entire operation in her hands. Amara exhaled slowly. "You said I wasn't leadership material," she whispered. "Let's test that theory." Her plan was no longer revenge. It was reclamation, of power, of narrative, of truth. The following morning, she met Leah at a small diner. Leah studied her over coffee. "You look dangerous," Leah said finally. "I feel alive. Just promise me you'll survive whatever this becomes." Amara stirred her coffee once. "I'm done surviving. I'm building." Leah smiled sadly. "You always were the quiet storm." Amara looked out the window, where the city was already moving. Polished shoes, briefcases, indifferent faces. "The system taught me everything I need to destroy it," she said. "Now it's time to apply what I've learned." Her reflection in the glass stared back, unflinching, calm, and quietly burning. The email arrived without a name, just a subject line. "I worked there too." No greeting, no signature, only an attachment. Amara hesitated before opening it. Encrypted PDF, password protected. At the bottom of the message, a single line. "We remember what they did to you." Password, optics. She entered the code. The document opened, internal audit reports, redacted correspondence, and a ledger showing consultancy payments routed to a private account under M. Talbot Holdings, Mark Talbot. The smirking CFO who had laughed the loudest in that boardroom. Her pulse steadied. She saved the files to a secure drive, labeling the folder Proof in Phase 2. By late afternoon, she sat across from David Shue again, this time in a parking lot behind a grocery store, the kind of meeting place no one cared to notice. He looked nervous, checking his phone every few seconds. "You shouldn't keep contacting me." "You sent me more than I expected," Amara said. "That wasn't me." He exhaled, shaky. "There are others." "Others?" He nodded. "Ex-employees. Contracted analysts. They've seen the same things. Some got paid to stay quiet. Some didn't. Can you get me to them?" "Maybe, but they're scared." Amara leaned closer. "So was I." David stared at her for a long time before saying, "You sound like you're building a movement." She smiled faintly. "No, just leverage." 2 nights later, her phone buzzed again, and a private number. "Who is this?" A man's voice, rough with fatigue. "You don't know me, but I worked under Talbot. Name's Samuel King. You're poking the right wound." "I'm not looking to make noise," she said. "I'm looking to make change." Samuel gave a low laugh. "Change costs blood. You sure you're ready to pay?" "I already did," Amara said flatly. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "I've got proof they cooked revenue reports before the merger. If you want it, you'll meet me in person. Tonight." They met in a dim bar near the harbor. Samuel was middle-aged, his tie loose, eyes clouded by too many disappointments. He slid a thin envelope across the table. "Hard copies. Safer that way." Amara opened it. Quarterly reports, falsified signatures, and an internal memo instructing staff to maintain uniform optimism for investor optics. That word again. Optics. "How long have they been doing this?" she asked. "Years," Samuel said. "You were the only one who ever challenged them. That's why they humiliated you, make you an example." Amara's jaw tightened. "And you stayed?" "I've got 2 kids. Staying was survival." She nodded once. "Survival's nothing to be ashamed of." He gave a bitter laugh. "You still think justice works?" She looked him in the eye. "No, but exposure does." When she left the bar, the city wind cut sharp against her skin. She walked quickly, head down, clutching the envelope like a weapon. At her office, she laid everything out. David's data, Samuel's files, and the anonymous audit. The pieces formed a perfect storm, she murmured to herself. They built their empire on fear and silence. Fine. Let's see how they handle a little noise. Her plan solidified. A multi-step takedown. Leak selective evidence to press outlets. Destabilize investor confidence, then buy their debt anonymously through shell partners. It was ruthless. Precise. Beautiful. Leah called the next morning. "You sound like someone about to do something irreversible," Amara said. "Maybe I am." Leah sighed. Talk to me before you burn the house down. It's already burning. I'm just deciding where the fire goes. Amara, I'm not reckless. I'm careful. I'll make sure it looks like the market turned on them. Nothing illegal. Everything you're describing sounds illegal adjacent. Then I'll stay adjacent, Amara said coldly. A week later, the Financial Tribune published an anonymous whistleblower article. Insider report suggests falsified statements at Lawson Capital. No names, no sources, just data. Enough to make noise, the stock dipped 8% overnight. Investors panicked. Greg Lawson called a press conference to deny the rumors. His smile looked tighter now. These baseless claims are being investigated internally, he said. Amara watched on her laptop sipping coffee. His voice trembled ever so slightly. Her phone buzzed, a message from Samuel. They're holding emergency meetings. You hit them harder than you think, she typed back. Good. Time for phase 2. That evening, David called. They've started internal audits. Everyone's scrambling. Perfect, Amara said. Panic breeds mistakes. Be careful, David warned. They'll start looking for the source. I left enough false trails. They'll blame each other before they blame me. You scare me sometimes, he said quietly. You should, she replied almost gently. I scare them too. By midnight, Amara was back at her desk drafting acquisition plans. If the market value dropped below a certain threshold, she could buy controlling interest using capital pooled from a few silent investors. Women and minorities she'd met through Leah's legal network. She ran the numbers again. It was possible. Risky, but possible. Her reflection in the darkened window looked like someone else. Composed. Calculating. Leah's words echoed faintly in her mind. They don't play fair. She whispered back. Neither do I. At dawn, an email arrived from Samuel. Subject. You've started something you can't stop. Amara smiled faintly, closing her laptop. Exactly. The city outside was just beginning to wake, unaware that its skyline was about to change. The morning headlines hit like a detonator. Lawson Capital faces. Whistleblower allegations. Stock plummets. 15%. CEO Greg Lawson denies fraud as investors. Demand answers. Screens across the city screamed the story in every financial district cafe. Amara watched one from her car, engine off, rain streaking the windshield. Greg's face filled the screen, polished composure cracking under scrutiny. Completely unfounded, he said, voice strained. Lawson Capital has always prioritized transparency and integrity. The irony almost made her laugh. Her phone buzzed. Leah, tell me this wasn't you, Leah said. No preamble, Amara didn't answer. Amara, I didn't say a word, she replied calmly. I just showed people what was already there. That's not denial, Leah shot back. Good, Amara said, because I don't owe one. By noon, chaos spread through Lawson Capital's upper floors. Amara's insider contacts reported meetings running until midnight, legal teams scrambling, investors pulling out. Greg slammed his office door so hard it cracked the glass panel. Who leaked this? He demanded. Mark Talbot raised both hands. We're still tracing it. Find them. Greg barked. Before this turns into a goddamn wildfire. Mark hesitated. Greg, the numbers they leaked, they're real. Greg's face darkened. Then we deny harder. Amara spent the afternoon at her office, eyes fixed on multiple monitors. Every dip in their stock was a beat in her plan's rhythm. She'd learned long ago that capitalism only respected two things: control and collapse. She whispered to herself, time to make both mine. Her phone vibrated, a message from Samuel. They've frozen bonuses. Talbot's panicking. You've got them on edge, good, she typed back. Next comes the squeeze. At 3 p.m., she called one of her silent investors, Amara Patel, a tech entrepreneur she'd met years ago at a diversity conference neither of them had wanted to attend. Mira, it's time, Amara said. You're serious? Their market cap is bleeding. I can acquire controlling debt for half its worth. You've been waiting for this, Mira murmured, since they laughed in my face. Mira chuckled softly. Then let's buy their silence. As the market closed, Lawson Capital's valuation had dropped 22%. Greg convened an emergency call with the board. This is a temporary setback, he said, forcing steadiness. We just need fresh investors, Mark frowned. And who exactly is going to invest in a scandal? Someone will, Greg said. Money doesn't have morals, but someone already was. Amara's firm, through a chain of intermediaries and holding companies, began acquiring Lawson's distressed bonds. Piece by piece, quietly, every purchase tightened the noose. That night, Amara sat on her apartment balcony, laptop balanced on her knees, city lights blinking below. Leah's voice came through her earbuds. You're orchestrating a financial coup. I'm just applying their own tactics, Amara said, except you're doing it alone. I'm never alone. Fear is doing half the work for me. Leah sighed. You're playing with fire. Amara closed her eyes. I am the fire. The next morning, Greg called Mark into his office. The stock buybacks, who's buying them? Mark checked his tablet. A consortium of small firms. Hard to trace. Greg leaned forward. Find out who they belong to. But it was already too late. By the end of the week, 41% of Lawson Capital's outstanding debt was held under one silent umbrella, AB Holdings, an entity Amara had created through a maze of LLCs. She looked at the confirmation emails, pulse steady. Checkmate. A few hours later, she received an encrypted message from David. They're panicking. Greg wants a full audit. He suspects internal sabotage, Amara typed back, then let him waste his time. David replied, You know, when I joined this company, I thought competence was the latter. Turns out it's camouflage. Amara smiled faintly. Camouflage works. Until someone turns on the light. 2 days later, a rumor broke. A whisper that Lawson Capital's credit rating was under review. Within hours, it became headline news. Investors fled. The company's liquidity dried up. Greg's PR team pushed another statement. We are in full control. Amara murmured at her screen. That's what people say before they lose it. Leah showed up at her office that evening, coat dripping from the rain. You've done it, she said, looking around at the scattered papers. They're collapsing. Amara nodded once. So what now? Justice? No, Amara said. Acquisition. Leah stared at her. You're actually going to buy them? Not me, Amara said quietly. AB Holdings will. Which is you? Leah said flatly. Amara didn't deny it. They taught me to play the game. I just stopped pretending it had rules. Leah's eyes softened. And after you win? Amara closed her laptop. Then I'll decide what to do with the ruins. The night stretched long and silent. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline. Inside, Amara sat perfectly still, the glow of her computer reflecting in her eyes. Her empire was taking shape, not built from glass and arrogance, but from precision and quiet fury. Somewhere across the city, Greg Lawson was losing sleep. And that, she thought, was only the beginning. The boardroom was a war zone in suits. Greg Lawson stood at the head of the table, eyes bloodshot, sleeves rolled, voice shredding through the stale air. We are not bankrupt, he roared. Around him, a dozen executives avoided eye contact. The projector displayed numbers no one could argue with. Liquidity frozen, credit rating slashed, stock price gutted to half its value in 1 week. We're hemorrhaging, shouted one director. Our investors are gone! Greg slammed his hand on the table. Then find new ones. A silence followed, heavy, suffocating. Finally, Mark Talbot cleared his throat. Greg, we can't. The only offers on the table are from a holding company called... He glanced down at his notes. AB Holdings. Greg frowned. Never heard of them. They've acquired over 40% of our debt. If we don't negotiate with them, they'll trigger a takeover clause by the end of the quarter. Greg's jaw tightened. Get me their CEO. Meanwhile, across the city, Amara walked through her firm's glass doors with the calm of someone who already knew the ending. Her team rose when she entered, Leah, Samuel, 2 junior analysts, all watching her as if witnessing the quiet before a revolution. Lawson Capital's board just called for an emergency session, Leah said. They're desperate. Good, Amara replied, setting her bag down. Then it's time they meet their new creditor. That afternoon, Greg received the meeting confirmation. Who's representing AB Holdings? He asked. Mark hesitated. A CEO named Amara Blake. Greg blinked. What? Amara Blake, Mark repeated, slower this time. Greg's lips twitched in disbelief. That can't be. That woman, he stopped himself. That woman, Mark said carefully, now owns most of our debt. Greg laughed once, sharp and humorless. She wouldn't dare. The next day, the elevators opened to Lawson Capital's 42nd floor. Amara stepped out in a black suit that caught every flash of the camera lenses waiting outside. The same boardroom where she had once been laughed at now stood silent as she entered. Greg was already there, red-eyed, jaw set, posture defensive. "Ms. Blake," he said tightly. "I assume this is a joke." Amara's voice was smooth. "The kind of joke your company used to enjoy, Mr. Lawson. But I assure you, this one's real." He glared. "What's your price?" "Ownership," she said simply. Murmurs rippled around the table. Greg's face turned crimson. "You think you can walk in here and take my company?" "You lost it the day you decided people like me didn't belong in this room," she said quietly. The board watched in stunned silence as she unfolded documents, acquisition terms, signed and sealed. "You'll find," she continued, "that AB Holdings now controls your debt, your remaining credit lines, and, effectively, your future." Greg's hand trembled as he reached for the papers. "You," he started, but the words died. Amara leaned forward slightly. "Funny, isn't it? You taught me how this works. Buy low, control the narrative, exploit weakness. Don't you dare moralize this," Greg hissed. "You think this makes you a hero?" "No," Amara said softly. "Just the consequence." The silence stretched. Finally, one of the older directors, a man who had ignored her the day she was humiliated, cleared his throat. "Ms. Blake, what are your intentions with the company?" Amara didn't look at Greg when she answered. "Restructure, clean house, restore integrity. Starting with leadership accountability." Greg shot up from his chair. "You're firing me?" Amara's eyes flicked to him. "You're resigning. I built this company." "And you buried it under greed," she replied. "Consider this mercy." He stood there for a long moment, fists clenched. Then slowly the fight left his shoulders. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time not as an outsider, not as a diversity hire, but as someone who had beaten him at his own game. "You won't last," he said finally, voice low. "They'll turn on you." Amara's gaze didn't waver. "Then they'll learn the same lesson you did. Power changes hands." Greg's lips parted as if to retort, but no words came. He gathered his papers, walked toward the door, and paused just before leaving. "You think this is justice?" he said without turning. "It's vengeance." Amara's voice followed him out. "Sometimes they look the same, until you read the fine print." After he left, the room exhaled. The directors began signing. One by one, ownership shifted. The final document passed to Amara. She took the pen, signed, and slid it back with steady hands. It was done. A company once ruled by arrogance now belonged to the woman they had humiliated. Hours later, in her new office, Greg's old office, Amara stood by the window, city lights flickering below. Leah entered quietly. "How does it feel?" Amara turned the pen in her hand. "Heavy. You won. I survived," she corrected. "Winning's just paperwork," Leah studied her. "You could dismantle everything. Sell it off, rebuild it clean." Amara's eyes were distant. "Maybe. But first, I want every intern, every junior analyst, every silenced voice to know who sits in this chair now." She looked back at the city. "I want them to see it's possible." Later that night, Greg Lawson's name trended online. Former CEO ousted amid allegations. The board had officially announced his resignation. In his apartment, Greg watched the news alone, drink untouched, face pale in the TV glow. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be powerless in a system built to protect the powerful. And across town, Amara looked out at the same skyline, whispering, "That's how it feels." But as the night deepened, the glow of victory dimmed. She saw her reflection in the glass, confident, composed, and exhausted. The empire was hers now. But beneath the triumph lay something colder, the cost of fighting a system designed to break her. And she knew the real battle was only just beginning. Morning came with silence, not applause. The building was hers now. Every marble tile, every frosted panel that once mirrored her humiliation. Yet as Amara walked through the corridors, the air felt heavier. Employees avoided her gaze, unsure if they were supposed to fear or follow. She entered the executive floor. The gold nameplate that once read Greg Lawson, CEO, was gone. In its place, Amara Blake, Leah, was already waiting inside. "Press wants a statement," she said. "They're framing it as a diversity victory." Amara's lips tightened. "Of course they are. They want to paint you as the symbol of progress." "I didn't do this for symbolism," Amara said quietly. "I did it because the system pretended people like me didn't belong, until it needed to." Leah hesitated. "You could use that attention. Shape the narrative." Amara looked out the window, the city sprawling in muted light. "The narrative doesn't need shaping. It needs exposing." By noon, the conference hall filled with press, board members, and a handful of remaining executives. Cameras flashed. The podium waited. Amara walked up slowly, her steps echoing in the hush. She looked out. Faces she once smiled at through gritted teeth. People who'd spoken over her, used her work, ignored her warnings. Lawson Capital, she began, voice steady, was once considered a pillar of integrity. But behind its glass walls lay rot, the kind built on silence, complicity, and selective blindness. She paused. No movement. No whispers. "I stood in this room a year ago," she continued. "Laughed at, dismissed, told I was too ambitious for my place. Today I stand in the same room, not to celebrate, but to reveal." A murmur rippled. Leah watched from the side, breath held. Amara pressed a button. Behind her, the screen lit up. Internal emails, bank transfers, audit documents. These records show how leadership funneled millions through shell foundations while cutting wages, hiding losses, and exploiting the very employees who kept this company alive. Reporters typed furiously. "Accountability," she said, "does not start with diversity panels or PR statements. It starts with the truth." When the press conference ended, the fallout began instantly. News outlets exploded with coverage. Greg's hidden accounts surfaced within hours. The Securities Commission launched a formal investigation. Leah found Amara in her office afterward, staring at the skyline again. "They're calling for his arrest," Leah said softly. Amara didn't look away from the glass. "They should have done it years ago. You just made it impossible for them not to." A small, exhausted smile ghosted across Amara's lips. "That's all change ever is, forcing them to look." 3 days later, Greg Lawson was arrested at his home in Connecticut. Cameras caught every second. The flash, the cuffs, the face that once smiled from magazine covers. Amara didn't watch it live. She was in a board meeting, listening as her new directors discussed reforms. "Public perception is improving," one said. "Investors are curious again." "Curious isn't commitment," she replied. "We'll earn that the way they should have, with transparency." She signed another document, policy revisions, pay equity, whistleblower protections. It was the rebuilding phase. The phase no one glorified. Later that night, Leah joined her at a rooftop bar, the same one where they'd once dreamed of walking out of Lawson Capital forever. "Two endings," Leah said, raising her glass. Amara hesitated. "To beginnings," she corrected softly. Leah smiled. "You really can't celebrate, can you?" Amara's voice was quiet, almost distant. "There's no celebration in justice this late. Just quiet relief that it finally happened." Leah studied her. "You lost a lot in this," Amara nodded. "And gained something heavier. Responsibility." When Leah left, Amara remained at the edge of the rooftop. The city stretched out below, endless lights blinking like static. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number, she answered, a male voice, a cracked, subdued. "Greg Lawson, you won," he said. "Congratulations," she said nothing. He continued. "They'll forget you next year. That's how this world works. They'll cheer you now, then move on to the next scandal." "I didn't do it for them," she said finally. He gave a dry laugh. "Then who?" "For every intern they made feel invisible. For every woman who stayed silent to keep her job. For my father." There was a pause. "You think you changed anything?" he asked. Amara's tone was calm. "I changed you." The line went dead. A week later, the building's lobby displayed a new plaque. Lawson Capital, now Blake Equity Partners. Below it, smaller text read, "Integrity begins where silence ends." Employees stopped to read it. Some smiled faintly. Some just nodded and kept walking. Inside her office, Amara finished signing a final document. Her company had officially absorbed Lawson Capital. Leah entered quietly. "It's done," she said. Amara set the pen down. "No," she murmured. "It's only beginning." Leah tilted her head. "You think people will remember what happened here?" Amara looked toward the skyline again, voice low. "They'll remember the silence before the fall." That night she left the building alone. The glass doors closed behind her, reflecting her face, calm, composed, resolute. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. She walked through it without opening her umbrella. The city lights blurred. The street glistened. The sound of rain drowned out everything, the applause, the headlines, even the echoes of old laughter. For the first time she didn't feel rage or triumph, only clarity. At the corner, she stopped. Across the street, a young woman in a cheap blazer stood under a flickering bus stop light, holding a folder labeled Job Application, Blake Equity Partners. Amara watched her for a moment, tired, determined, full of the same hunger she'd once carried into rooms that never wanted her there. The bus arrived. The girl looked up, their eyes met briefly through the glass. Amara gave a single nod. The bus pulled away, and Amara turned back toward her building, rain streaming down. The city's heartbeat steady again. It wasn't peace, but it was justice, imperfect, fragile, earned. 6 months later, the city had learned to say her name, Amara Blake, CEO, founder, disruptor. The news cycle had cooled. The headlines faded, but her presence lingered, not as a symbol of diversity, as journalists had tried to box her in, but as a living reminder of what happens when the silent learn to speak in capital letters. The building once called Lawson Capital now bore a new logo, Blake Equity Partners. Its lobby hummed with quiet activity. Young interns, analysts, new hires, many of them from the same backgrounds the old firm had quietly excluded. It looked like progress. But Amara knew better than to trust appearances. Leah entered her office one morning with 2 cups of coffee. "You're trending again," she said, dropping a tablet on the desk. Amara didn't look up. "For what this time?" Leah grinned. "Apparently you refused an award." "I refuse all awards." They called it a statement of humility. "It's not humility," Amara said, scanning reports. "It's exhaustion." Leah sat down. "You've rebuilt half the firm. Investors are coming back. Lawson's trial starts next week. You could rest?" Amara finally looked up. "Rest isn't part of the rebuild." "Not yet." Leah studied her, the dark circles, the composure that looked like armor. "You don't have to keep fighting ghosts." Amara's tone was soft but final. "They're not ghosts, Leah, they're habits. Habits of power that survive people." The phone buzzed. A call from the Financial Chronicle. She ignored it. Another from the City Post. Declined. Leah raised an eyebrow. "Still dodging interviews?" "Words don't fix systems," Amara replied. "Policies do." Later that afternoon, she walked the floor, no press, no entourage. Just Amara moving through cubicles, stopping to speak to new hires, listening more than she talked. A young analyst named Priya nervously stopped her. "Ms. Blake, I just wanted to say, it means a lot to see someone like you up there." Amara's expression softened. "It's good to see someone like you down here," she said. "That's where it starts." Priya smiled. Tentative but genuine. Moments like that, fleeting, small, were the quiet proof that something had shifted. That evening, she stood on the same rooftop where she and Leah had toasted months ago. The skyline glowed like static, the wind cutting clean through the noise. She closed her eyes. The weight of everything pressed in. The public victories, the private exhaustion, the endless scrutiny. Every success she achieved came with whispers. She got lucky. She played the race card. She's the exception, not the rule. She'd stopped listening, but silence had its own gravity. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from an unknown number. A photo attachment: Greg Lawson escorted into a courthouse, head lowered. Under it, a short message: he pled guilty. For a long time, Amara didn't move. She just watched the image. The man who once dismissed her, now reduced to a name in an indictment. Justice wasn't as satisfying as she'd imagined. It never was, it just ended. Days later, Leah found her sitting in the break room, alone with a folder of papers. "New case?" Leah asked. Amara nodded. "A smaller firm in Detroit. Same pattern. Underpaid workers, falsified grants, coded exclusions. Different names, same game." Leah smiled wryly. "You're addicted." "Maybe," Amara admitted. "But someone has to keep the light on." "You ever think about what comes next? Beyond all this?" Amara looked at her. "You mean when I stop fighting?" "Yeah." She considered it, then said quietly, "I think when that day comes, I'll teach, maybe write, help someone else build what I never had." Leah leaned back. "That sounds almost peaceful." Amara smiled faintly. "Almost." A week later, she received a letter in plain envelope, postmarked no return address. Inside, a single sheet. "You were right. The system only listens when it's afraid." She read it twice, then folded it carefully and slid it into a drawer. Not out of sympathy, but because even villains can confirm a truth. Months passed. The company stabilized. Salaries rose. New policies rippled through the sector, copied by competitors desperate to catch up. But with visibility came new challenges. Lawsuits, political attacks, token invitations to panels she refused. She stayed focused. One afternoon, she was preparing for a strategy meeting when Leah burst in, breathless. "You're not going to believe this." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Try me. Lawson's assets and his personal ones just went up for auction." Amara froze. "The estate?" Leah nodded. "All of it, including the old lake house he used for company retreats." Amara said nothing for a moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. "Buy it," Leah blinked. "You want to own his house?" "I want to turn it into a leadership academy," Amara said, voice steady. "For women of color in finance. For anyone they told no." Leah stared, then grinned. "That's poetic." "Justice always should be," Amara said. Months later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony took place at that very house. Reporters swarmed, cameras clicked, but Amara spoke briefly. No performance, no slogan. "This place," she said, standing before the crowd, "was once where decisions were made to keep certain people out. From today forward, it will train the ones who'll never ask permission again." The applause rose. Genuine this time. Leah stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with quiet pride. That night, when the guests were gone, Amara stayed behind. The lake was still, the air cool. She walked to the water's edge, the reflection of the building rippling in the surface. She knelt, touched the water lightly, a gesture of release more than triumph. Her father's face flashed in her mind. His quiet dignity, his belief that the world could change if you just worked hard enough. She whispered, "You were right, Dad. It just took louder work." The wind carried her words away. Back in her office weeks later, she finally drafted a letter. Not to the press, not to investors, but to her younger self, to the girl they ignored in meetings. The one who smiled when they called her too confident. Remember, silence isn't professionalism. It's permission. Never give it again. She signed it. Amara Blake. She placed it in her desk drawer beside Greg's old letter. Two opposite testaments to the same war. Evening settled. The building emptied. Amara stood once more at the window. The city below alive and imperfect. In the glass reflection, her face overlapped the skyline. Not above it, not apart from it, but part of it now. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Leah. "You did it," Amara typed back. "No, we started it." She set the phone down, turned off the lights, and walked out. The doors closed behind her and quiet, final, steady. The empire she'd reclaimed didn't shine anymore. It breathed, and somewhere in that rhythm, justice, flawed, human, unfinished, kept beating.